Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to day 3 of SGI Talks. I'm your host for this afternoon. My name is Rawan Radwan, and today we'll talk about a very complex subject: climate change, community engagement, and mental health. Please welcome to the stage with me, Ragad and Munira. Welcome, ladies.
Thank you.
Thank you. So, mental health, and let's start with consumption. We have been seeing nonstop things on television and on social media, how floods are happening, severe thunderstorms, sandstorms, and the effects of these sandstorms and these weather issues and the implications of that on the globe, on certain communities, of course. And it's having an effect on us. Let's talk a little bit more about that. And Ragad, let's start with that.
Sure.
Specifically, if you don't mind,
Yeah.
term I'd like to use for you to explain a little bit more about climate anxiety.
Absolutely. We definitely live in a weird time. We are at the verge of a 6th mass extinction, purely led by human activity alone. Yet our current behaviors and choices and methods of consumption and production are leading us towards a planet that is not fit, it's not healthy, it's reacting, it's asking for our attention, our help, and in a consequence, we are also feeling that. We do live in a very interconnected world. Everything is interconnected. And we tend to forget that. We tend to forget that we are also part of nature. We are nature. It's one ecosystem. And hence, for sure, we're struggling from climate anxiety. Climate anxiety, to me, is a consequence, a state of mind, an emotional state that you would feel due to the disconnect between humanity and nature. As we kind of go through the consequences of climate change, there's a burden on individuals. There's a sense of fear, lack of control, and overwhelmed, not knowing what to do or if there's anything to do. It feels like hopeless, or fear leads to paralysis. There isn't much to do. So that's, I feel, the state we're in today that is leading towards climate and anxiety.
And is it more of a collective or more of an individual state of mind?
Climate and anxiety, I think, well, it differs. I think it could be both. It could be on an individual level. You go through that experience. But again, nothing is really separate in this world. I think there is always this collective shared mindset, especially that we live in a very interconnected world and globalized world with social media and the progress and development of artificial intelligence and technology. There's no separation in a way, but for some reason there is separation from nature, hence the result.
I think this is where Munira comes in. Community engagement. We are part of a collective. Saudi Arabia is a very interconnected community. Well, even if you're from the east, I'm from the west, north, or south, we're very much interconnected.
Yeah.
Community engagement plays a major role in alleviating climate anxiety. From your perspective, how do you see that happening?
The community engagement here, from our experience in the Saudi Arabian Botanical Society, it's very effective in our community. Like garden therapy for people, if we do then activities, therapy, and once the people and patient touch the soil and do the activities and in the garden, it will be reflected on their mental health, and it will be helps reduce the anxiety. Also, we have another programs. It's for the children also. It's for and the practice for doing, for example, the vegetable boxes and composting. It will be helps for two things: raise the awareness And also, it's very good for the mental health and anxiety, reduce the anxiety.
Education plays a major role here, and awareness in general. We are very fortunate, alhamdulillah, here in Saudi Arabia.
Yeah.
Of course, with SGI and other initiatives that are promoting not simply mental health well-being, but also understanding the implications of climate change now more so than ever before. Awareness is imperative, it's key. Where do you both feel education comes in, and from your personal experiences?
Early, always. The moment you know that a person, a human being, is coming into this life, early childhood is an ideal time to start, because that's when you shape the human and set a standard to how they're going to interact with themselves and the world. So I think we need to invest into early childhood environmental education for sure, but in a very creative, informal approach. We live in a completely new world. The job market is changing because of artificial intelligence, and I think that is helping us to also look at the role of education in a new and a fresh way. It has to revolutionize, and it's also we're in a position where we're forced, but also that us being forced is creating a new opportunity for us to really progress to meet our demands and demands of the future leaders that we need. And I think the role of education here is, for instance, how can we teach children about environmental education in informal ways? Either it's through school gardens or planting, or simply by using playgrounds that are more sustainable and making sure that the plants that are around the gardens are local. There's names of the plants and where they're coming from. They could interact with it. Imagine if every student came into a school in kindergarten and they would plant a seed. And they would make, I don't know, set an intention or make a wish of, what they want to be or what is going to grow. And they would come every day to nourish that plant. So in a process, they're not just taking care of a plant, they're learning how to connect with the soil. They're learning about themselves too. Actually, as a founder of Sangha Siddharma Hub, we created this program that is based on perma-model positive psychology, the 5 elements of well-being. One of the sessions, it's about accomplishment. And we took a very planetary conscious approach to learning and healing that disconnect between humanity and nature. So how can we merge well-being and environmental education into one thing? So it's really a planting session. What we're saying here is, let's say we're working with a school, would ask students and teachers to recycle paper, would come in, we collect the paper and create recycled plantable paper. So there's seeds in the paper. We start the session by, it's a planting session. We say, take the soil as a metaphor for your subconscious mind. Every word you tell yourself or someone tells you is a seed that is being planted. So how can you approach your subconscious mind and weed out limiting beliefs and plant either new beliefs or goals that you'd like to nourish? So in the process, they're learning about the difference between a growth mindset and a fixed mindset, something that is very personal and is quite needed to build that resilience towards, overcoming the anxiety that we're feeling, but also building someone that is not just going to deal with the symptoms of an anxiety, but we prevent that from happening because we're already shaping the mindset of someone who is resilient and proactive. So yes, they write whatever they want on that paper, the plantable paper. They would plant it, they would nourish it the same way the plant needs to be nourished, your belief or goal needs to. So it's bringing that kind of approach together where you have 2 in 1, but again, not waiting for them to feel anxious and then we deal with it. How can we make sure from a very early on we elevate what it means to be human and set a standard, and that standard to be Saudi or human, hopefully all over, is how can we ensure that we have well-conscious, active green citizens? That's one approach, but I also know that you do something very similar.
Yeah. About the awareness project, we have a successful awareness educational initiatives for the children. It's called Batila. We did the first edition with supported by Princess Al Anud Foundation and the second by Environmental Fund. We did it physically in Wadi Hanifa. We teach the children how to respect the plants through the art and entertainment, and we do different sections. The different section about the gardening, composting, the vegetable boxes, Another corner talking about the botanist and how to start from the seed to the fruits. And the second corner it's about botanical garden, botanical corner. We teach them also how to respect the plants through the art. We did some art activities for the youth. And this is the last one. It's a cleanup. Then we start to planting on Wadi Hanifa. And after we finished this event, now before we did it 2 times. One it was last March, yes. The first edition it was in 2021. And the children, they love it, and they visit it a lot, and they want to repeat, and they like the experience a lot. And we encourage the children to repeat it, and they planting trees on their own in their house. Also, the awareness should be started, as we discussed before, from the home, from the mothers.
Yeah. No, you mentioned something about the initiative that you just talked about, that you had a collaboration with another entity, Princess Al Anoud Foundation, which is something that is very much necessary in terms of a community engagement. So we're talking about governments, NGOs, non-profit organizations.
Private sector.
Exactly, private sector. So do you feel, or how do you see all these collaborative efforts to address the issues of climate change and mental health?
I will tell you something. Once we start to establish the Saudi Arabian Botanical Society in 2018, we noticed there is a low awareness about the environment, about the plants, and we're trying hard to build this botanical society and matching with the Vision 2030 also. Alhamdulillah, we get official license in 2020, and we started. But the big support it came for us after the Saudi Green initiatives. It's helped us a lot and encourage all of the private sector and the government and the foundations to support the environmental NGOs. And before the initiatives, it was not like now. It depends on the personal or individual's interest and some foundations or some companies. It's not like now we received a lot of initiatives and a lot of requests from the international companies, local companies, government. They want us to do different initiatives with them to raise the awareness, also to planting trees in the society. Also, they are support us to help us to build our projects, like establish the first national botanical garden in Saudi Arabia. We have many initiatives, also to helping an anxiety, like botanical spa for the oldest, and it will be reflected so much on the mental health.
This comes in a way full circle, because you are not only providing these different holistic approaches, but you're also changing a mindset. So when we mentioned earlier the victim or the victimization, you're changing that perspective into something a little bit more positive, which will inevitably turn into action. Community engagement, NGOs, governments, private sector, individuals, all play a part here. But how can we adopt? How can we adopt these approaches? Some people might say it's difficult. Some people might say, no, it's a bit complicated, but it's not complicated. How, in your opinion, can we adopt these holistic approaches to manage the anxiety or climate anxiety?
On an individual level, you mean?
On an individual level,
yeah. I think, first of all, you have to educate yourself. Educate yourself on why we live in, why are we facing these challenges? Understand that you play a role, and if you don't like what you're seeing, understand what you could do differently. Once you identify what you could do differently, take small actions. And I think sometimes we feel a bit powerless because we feel the issue is too big and one person is not going to change everything. But if everyone just did their part, I think it's quite simple, right? Just do your part. Tell yourself that by doing this, let's say by recycling, I'm going to start recycling at home, and I'm going to teach my parents how to recycle, and I'm going to inspire my friends when they come over to recycle as well, and I'm going to share on Instagram to those who are interested that I found a recycling company, and you could also do it. And by doing so, you're taking action into, just like doing something differently. So identify what the issue is, identify what you could do, hold yourself accountable, do something about it. I think a lot of the times we're just so paralyzed and we expect people to come and solve our issues or just rely too much on governments. But what are nations but people? It's made by its people. And I think we need to be more proactive and proactive citizens. Play the role. Be that person that makes your city, your country a better place, and hopefully the world a better place. But also, I understand that I'm not going to take away from saying that, okay, you're feeling overwhelmed, then just take action, but also be kind to yourself, right? Especially if you live in cities, it is quite overwhelming. You're so detached from nature, and it's suffocating. The quality of air, the lack of greenery, and just it's a hectic lifestyle overall. It's so easy to kind of lose yourself. So I think from time to time, just make sure that you create time for yourself where you disconnect and reconnect with nature, because that's when you reconnect with yourself too. And just realizing that by reconnecting with nature, we're connecting with ourselves, and building that respectful, compassionate relationship is a good step, because if you care about the environment, you're going to care about yourself, and vice versa. It's very intertwined. It's not that separate. That's on an individual level, but there's so much that we could do. I think a bit more harmony and creative solutions between private and the public sector together to just look at the issue and the solutions that were coming up a bit more creatively. I think sometimes we are very overwhelmed by the problem that we think the solution must be like this thing that we've never thought of before, when it could be very simple. It could be turning our rooftops into gardens and spaces where we connect. It could, I don't know, it could be so many different small answers.
We have that. We have that, and with the help of NGOs, such as the Botanical Society. I think, Munira, you could really touch on what Ragad mentioned, changing that mindset, small acts that can go a very long way. From your experience, have you seen that through the cooperations that you had with other entities, the actually change of the mindset to something a little bit more positive and impactful?
Yeah, for example, for the foundations, also for the government. For example, there is one of the foundation. They don't have streams to raise awareness, for example, and education for the community about the environment. After the SGI, they make a stream for the environment and to raise awareness and job creation. It's a King Khalid Foundation, and last year they supported us on the green opportunities. We went with them. We provide them a course. It's called How to Take Care of the Native Plants in Saudi Arabia. And we finished, alhamdulillah, before 2 months, and we graduated 30 candidates, and they are now ready to work on different entities between the private sector and the government.
these adopting these smart practices go a very long way, and as you mentioned, on an individual level and on a government, community level, NGOs and private sector. But let's go back just a little bit. The culture. We are a nation, a very young nation of 70% or maybe 65, I think, or 70% youth. We're very adaptable. We adapt to change very quickly. But we did not know very much of what was happening around the world. We saw sandstorms as just sandstorms, but now we know more. The awareness level has increased exponentially. Munira, you mentioned something backstage about the level of awareness and how these small practices have gone very impactful in where you're from or where your city is, and so did you. Let's talk a little bit about that, about the cultural perspective. And Ragad, you mentioned something backstage that was very, very interesting. The culture in the past, sustainability.
I think over generations, we've seen that the level of awareness has been just increasing. So I remember, I think maybe maybe let's say my eldest sister, the way she learned about how can you be an eco-friendly would be just don't litter. Littering, and it was very intertwined with our values in Islam, right?
Yes.
A Muslim person doesn't litter. A Muslim person doesn't waste. These are core values. It wasn't about science. It was values. But values are a way of life, and it has wisdom to it. And then science comes and tells us why. The second, then, it would be the mid-child, my other sister. She learned a bit more about, or maybe Hatta Ana, like even myself, recycling. I was the president of my class, and I started recycling paper. That was the easiest thing to start recycling in school. And that was, they were trying to kind of push us, be leaders, be proactive. Let's start recycling in schools. And then I think now this generation, mashallah, they know all about the SDGs. They're traveling all over the world, becoming ambassadors really from a very young age, saying what projects they've led on. Because we are also a very young nation, it's this energy that could do so much, right? And you invest it with the right mindset, skills, knowledge, opportunities, and platforms, they can do wonders. And I think we're seeing that today. They're becoming really proactive, and even in the MENA region, to be honest, I heard the statistic, I think 70% of startups in the MENA region the founders are between the age of 24 and 34, so young. And I think it was 46%, 46% of those entrepreneurs started their startups as they were studying. So I think the urgency to create change is there, and I love the approach, maybe because of so many different limitations. The way to create change and impact is truly through contributing through solution rather than just talking about it and demanding it. It created such a proactive, resilient leaders who are problem solvers. And I think that's such an added value today that we have. Did I answer your question?
You did. And Munira, I think you also had a very similar perspective, but more of a personal experience with the cultural perspective in the kingdom and how it's influencing the understanding of how we can respond to climate change.
Yeah, I think, for my personal things, I tell them the story because I'm from small town. It's called Al Harik. And they are very famous of this citrus fruit. And I see them, once I visited them, they are working hard, working with love and with their farms and taking care of their farms and agriculture and the fruits. And their psychology and mental health, it's much better more than us and living on the modern city. And also, I see the change, the difference between us and between them. Also, there is another thing. It's a policy. Once we have a good policy and we have a great support from the government, it will be change the culture. It will be changed the culture. And I would love invite all of us to visit the Citrus Festival in next of January, inshallah, to visit Al Harig and to see the citrus fruit.
Save the date, everyone.
Yeah.
Welcome to Saudi and welcome to the city of Harig.
Yeah, I will host all of you.
Ladies, I'd like to ask an interesting, having heard the conversation, the flow of the conversation, I feel that we could change our perspective on climate anxiety just a little bit, because as I can deduce from the conversation that we are very much resilient, whether it's the older generation, the newer generation, we're adapting, we're learning, we're raising awareness. We've accepted the fact that climate change is real. All these sandstorms that we're suffering from, for example, throughout the year, have, by the way, decreased this year, just FYI. And this is a result of SGI. This is a result of afforestation. This is a result of different initiatives that are being taken to reduce the effects of the sandstorms. This is one example. But do you think, or do you believe that maybe we've reduced the prevalence or the occurrence of climate anxiety in Saudi Arabia? I don't hear much of that elevated or, yeah.
Yeah, good point. But also just a reminder, we're a culture that doesn't really share much. For the longest time, it wasn't, you just keep it to yourself and go pray, really. So you wouldn't hear it.
But no, yeah.
But I think more and more now with the younger generations having that, they're so open to the world and seeing that emotional intelligence and self-care is very important. They're like, oh, what I'm feeling, I can identify it. It has a name, and I can overcome it because now I know what it is. I can talk to someone. It's much more. A bit more normalized today. Maybe different generations would see it differently, but at least this generation is willing to say, I'm not feeling great and I'm going to receive help. I don't think we attach it to climate and anxiety. However, because there's so much that the youth feel they have to do as well. Yes, being proactive is great. Yes, doing so much is great. But you're going to get tired. There's a point where, like, how much more can I do?
But
and
this is where collaborative effort comes in.
True.
Yeah.
And I think it's also changing the narrative of what it means to be proactive. You don't have to, like, hustle all the time. And I think it's all about the narrative. Changing the narrative around climate change, changing the narrative about what it means to be an entrepreneur nowadays, changing the narrative about success doesn't mean you have to suffer and hustle. Work hard, yes, but work smart as well. It's not really climate and anxiety, but it's an undertone because it's not direct. The consequences of climate change is not so direct, maybe in Saudi, but in the MENA region it is, to an extent. So that's kind of my take on it.
Munira, do you think we changed a little bit of the perspective? What do you think?
Yeah, I think we change, and I hope that, I believe we will change, because we have to connected the nature with our life direct. Like, for example, the medical hospital or the mental hospitals, it should be connected with the nature, with the garden, and do much more activity in our life, that it will be reflected in our health.
All right.
Yeah.
Ladies, thank you so much for this conversation. Thank you, everyone, for coming. I'm sure this conversation will continue. So if you have any more questions, we can ask after the session has ended. Thank you again, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.